Vancouver News.
We're not against supportive housing. We're against this low barrier drug site housing, which is causing problems.
Supportive housing battle. BC Conservative MLAs join opponents of a controversial project in Richmond after the province said yes, but City Council said no.
The question is, will the government now override Richmond Council and force it upon the community?
Plus,
we need to be out in nature. We need the same access to information and places.
making nature more accessible. We'll take you on a new trail near Nanaimo for people who are visually impaired.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. More than a dozen people have been hurt after a plane crashed and flipped onto its back at Toronto's Pearson Airport earlier in the day, closing down its runways.
We're in Toronto. We just landed. Our plane crashed.
That Delta Airlines passenger jet flipped upside down while landing. The twin jet engine was flying in from Minneapolis and operated by Endeavour Air. Paramedics say 80 passengers and crew were on board. Officials say 18 people were taken to hospital. At last check, 3 in critical condition, including a child rushed to Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital. It's not yet clear what caused the plane to crash and overturn. We'll have more on the story as it comes in. A group of Richmond residents opposed to a supportive housing project rallied at City Hall earlier in the day. They want to keep pressure on the BC government to permanently cancel the project after Richmond Council revoked its approval. As Rob Easton reports, some are concerned the province may overrule the city.
So we're not against supportive housing. Everyone is in favor of supportive housing. We're against this low barrier drug site housing, which is causing problems not just in Richmond, but in communities across the province.
Yes. Organizers with the group Keep Richmond Safe rallying opponents of an on-again, off-again supportive housing project in Richmond. Community concerns over alleged open drug use in public safety caused the project to go through provincial review last fall. The group says the province's approach to mental health and addiction is one-sided and doesn't address what they call the root causes of the problem.
I think we should have more of the 4 pillars, because right now it's only the 1 pillar that's being used. Why don't we, instead of supporting housing, why don't we build a detox center?
Then last week, the province said it was back on, but then the city of Richmond withdrew its support. Flanked by Conservative MLAs, Leader John Rustad says the ball is in the province's court to address the community's concerns.
We have Richmond Council has now said no. The question is, will the government now override Richmond Council and force it upon the community?
Rustad says the province needs a comprehensive plan involving treatment and keeping drugs away from people living with addiction. But some at the rally went even further.
You jail and no bail. I know that sounds very political nowadays. I don't give a damn. We should have been doing that years ago. We should have been hard on drugs. And you give people treatment and keep them there until they are better. And that's what we have to do.
I understand that we should have compassion to these people. They probably had bad time, they had a rough life. But think of a way to help them, not to keep pushing them to take drugs. It's not a solution.
But despite concerns, the BC Ministry of Housing told CBC News late Monday they will not overrule the city because the city owns the land. Rob Easton, CBC News, Richmond.
The federal government is now recognizing Aboriginal title on Haida Gwaii. Officials signed the Haida title lands agreement in Skidegate earlier in the day. The federal Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations says this is the first time Ottawa has recognized Aboriginal title through negotiations.
While there's almost always more work to do after we achieve something, this signifies an enormous moment in our collective history.
The agreement includes beds of freshwater bodies, the foreshores, and extends to the low tide mark. The federal government says the agreement will kick off a 5-year transition period and require legislation to iron out all the details about how it will apply. In practice, the agreement does not impact private property rights or landowners. From inside the rink to outdoors, Russ LeCate joins us with our first look at the weather. Most of the snow, at least from where I see it, Russ, gone across Metro Vancouver. How are our mountains doing?
Still a lot of snow up there, and I think there's much more to come, Dan. It's a good news forecast for late winter. As we look here, the Arctic area, you know, the polar vortex, the lobe of cold air that came down across Western Canada, it's retreated onto the other side of the BC-Alberta border now. We had a couple of light flurries around the region during the day earlier today. I want to show you what's coming over the next 24 hours. We roll ahead our forecast model. You know, extra clouds tonight, but it's relatively dry. And even during the day tomorrow, maybe a few sprinkles coming in around midday into the afternoon. Nothing much more than that, to be honest. The main event actually arrives Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. It is going to be widespread rain. So a really wet day Wednesday. But before we get there, Tuesday's not bad. You know, with clouds over tomorrow, relatively dry, sprinkle or two, about 8 degrees. Looks okay to me, Dan.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Russ. Returning now to our top story, a plane crashed and flipped onto its back at Toronto's Pearson International Airport earlier in the day, injuring at least 18 passengers and closing down the airport's runways. Thomas Dagla has more on a terrifying ordeal for those on board.
We just landed. Our plane crashed.
With their plane upside down on the tarmac, amazingly, most passengers managed to walk away unharmed, wearing whatever they had on for their Delta Airlines flight from Minneapolis as crews doused the fuselage in the freezing cold.
Everything, drop it. Come on.
Passengers had to crawl on the plane's roof to get out, encountering snow on the runway after a harrowing landing. This woman posting video while upside down, then getting out in a daze.
I was just in a plane crash. Oh my God.
543 ground runway 24 right, data Scalp altimeter 2993. Stand by. This airplane just crashed at 23.
It was routine, but like it was noticeable that the runways were kind of in a weird condition. And when we hit, it was just a super hard, like a hit the ground and the plane went sideways.
You know, it's just at least a real experience, and I was just in a shock, and I was like, you know, did I just see what I just saw, right? So, yeah, it was just unbelievable.
Taylor Lundquist had come to pick up a friend on that flight.
He just said that it bounced when it landed and then it was upside down.
That Bombardier CRJ 900 carrying 80 passengers and crew faced gusty winds as it descended. Exactly what happened in the flight's final seconds isn't clear.
I could see that it just struggled just before landing, and I think it just, because of the high winds, it just flipped.
Officials closed all Pearson runways for hours, diverting flights elsewhere for much of the afternoon.
We can now confirm that 18 injured passengers have been transported to the local area hospitals.
Officials providing only a brief update and taking no questions about an incident that's left many wondering what happened.
Thomas Dagla reporting. We've long heard of the benefits of getting outdoors, exercise, fresh air, connecting with nature. Now a new trail in Qualicum, just north of Nanaimo, is making the outdoors more accessible for people who are visually impaired. The CBC's Claire Palmer takes us there.
This is Heather Hutchinson. Blind since birth, she's happy to be out on the trails.
Yeah, it definitely gives me a sense of independence. I feel like I could navigate out here by myself. It's very freeing.
Hutchison is able to enjoy the trail using this, a tapping rail, a low barrier on the side of the trail that she can use to help guide her cane. She says it's a game changer.
We know how important it is for people to get out in nature for mental and physical well-being, and sometimes there's obstacles to that for me as a blind person. So I'm super excited to find a place created for me that I can access.
Advocates say small changes like this are crucial for independence and accessibility. The Canadian National Institute for the Blind says accessibility is sometimes only thought of when things are necessities and not always for recreational purposes.
When we need to make things accessible, there's a big focus on the word need. So, you know, what are the essential services that people have to have access to, like healthcare services and things like that are truly essential. But you know, I think also we can make the argument, though, make the case that quality of life is essential.
you know, it's more than a want, really. It's a need. We need to be out in nature. We need the same access to information and places and activities as everybody else. We need to be out with our friends, with our families. So to me, it's not even that much of a want. It is a need.
The RDN says it's just one of many projects they're working on to make their trails more accessible.
Very important to have access for everybody. We want to include people, we want to have access, we want to have barrier-free park systems so that people can enjoy the beautiful parks that we have in the regional district in Nanaimo. Many sights to see, many features, water access, ramps to get down to the water and beach areas that we're working on with gangways. So many examples.
Increasing accessibility in its parks was just one priority outlined in the RDN's Parks and Trail Strategy, which was completed in 2022 after public consultation. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Qualicum.
After the break, a look at the 60-year-old Canada-U.S. water treaty centered right here in BC. As U.S. President Trump threatens to impose tariffs on Canadian products and electricity, calls to end the treaty are getting louder. With tensions high between Canada and the U.S. over tariff threats and sovereignty, some Canadians have called on leaders to cut off energy supplies to the states. But as Yvette Brent reports, now others are urging them to tear up the decades-old Columbia River Water Treaty that starts right here in BC.
A stunning vista, but not to Crystal Spicer.
It's devastating to look at.
That's because decades ago it was here that waters swallowed her family farm when this area was flooded.
I'll never forget the paradise it was before.
A fertile valley, First Nations lands, all lost to create a reservoir to control the water flow for downstream states.
I've always looked forward to the modernization or the termination of the treaty because it's been so unbalanced.
The Spicers fought for their home, less water fluctuations to preserve the fish, the river, seen by Trump as a faucet.
So you have millions of gallons of water pouring down from the north with the snow caps in Canada and all pouring down. And they have essentially a very large faucet.
These red dots represent just some of the 60 dams on the Columbia River Basin system, which provides more than 40% of all the hydroelectric power in the U.S.
I know Canada was compensated monetarily, but not enough for what Canada lost.
She says tearing up the treaty would help Canada push back against tariff and other threats.
And if Canada really wants to play hardball, Canada can say, we're serving notice of termination. We're going to run this river exactly how we want to run this river.
The BC minister in charge of treaty negotiations says the process would take 10 years and wouldn't help.
It wouldn't have much impact on the current situation, which is an immediate and vicious attack on Canadian sovereignty that we have to respond to.
I am in favor of it because we need control for our own objectives.
Spicer is all for terminating the treaty. As for Trump retaliation,
I would expect it, but I would hope that Canada would stand its ground.
She hopes at least the renegotiated, modernized treaty, which involved years of talks with First Nations and surrounding communities, will survive the latest turbulence coming from our southern neighbor. Yvette Brent, CBC News, Vancouver.
Pope Francis will have to stay in hospital a bit longer. Doctors say they are changing his treatment, describing his illness as complex. The 88-year-old pontiff was admitted to hospital on Friday. He's been suffering from bronchitis for more than a week. Doctors say recent tests indicate he is suffering from a mix of viruses, bacteria, fungi, or parasites in his lungs. But reportedly, he's in good spirits and is eating. Demonstrations were held across Israel marking 500 days of captivity for the remaining hostages being held in Gaza, seized in October 7th attacks by Hamas. In Tel Aviv, protesters blocked a busy highway. The 500-day mark comes amid persistent fears that the current ceasefire that's seen more than 20 hostages released could collapse. The demonstrators are urging Israel's government to protect and extend the ceasefire. In Jerusalem, protesters marched to the Knesset, taking their messages directly to lawmakers. 73 hostages have not yet been returned. And this is a live look at the Toronto skyline. After the break, we'll take a look out east at the snowstorm hitting Atlantic Canada now. Russ LeCate will give us the rundown of our BC weather forecast. Stick around.
I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
Canada's biggest night in music is coming to Vancouver, and we want you to be there. The Juno Awards will be hosted by BC's own Michael Bublé, live from Rogers Arena on Sunday, March 30th. The evening features live performances by Juno-nominated artists, including a special award presentation to rock band Sum 41. Tickets on sale now at cbcmusic.ca/Junos.
Much of the eastern half of this country is digging itself out after two back-to-back winter storms buried Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes under a blanket of snow. As Vanessa Lee shows us, it could take more than a week to get some of the major cities moving again.
The snow has tapered off, but it was another miserable day, with Montrealers digging out in punishing winds and frigid temperatures. For the second time in 4 days, schools and daycares were closed. The city struggling under the weight of 74 centimeters of snow since Thursday.
When you actually look at the 4-day total for Montreal, that is the highest 4-day total we have on record, and that is since 1941.
City officials say it will take longer than usual to clear 11,000 kilometers of streets and sidewalks.
We have 3,000 employees, 2,500 trucks on the road.
After also being blanketed with heavy snow from back-to-back storms, Toronto says clearing it all could take up to 3 weeks. More snow fell in the past week than what the city saw all last winter.
Why does it take so long to actually remove snow? Plowing snow on a 1 kilometer local residential road takes approximately 5 to 10 minutes. And that's a vehicle traveling at about 15 kilometers an hour.
Despite being hit with 2 snowstorms, Winterlude wrapped up in Ottawa on Monday with what organizers say could be its most attended season yet.
I wanted to come here yesterday, but I couldn't. There was no way you could go anywhere. So today is a perfect day.
Strong winds caused thousands to wake up without power on this holiday Monday in Atlantic Canada. This was perhaps the most enjoyable way to get around when snow turned into freezing rain.
Chopping away at the snow, which has got very icy on top. My snowblower will not work.
Back here in Montreal, authorities are urging people to stay off the streets so crews can clear all of this snow and things can get back to normal. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
Russ, my back just hurts looking at that. Oh my goodness.
A lot of work digging that much snow.
Are we done with that kind of weather here?
Well, I'll tell you what, when we had the little bit of snow that we had here, Dan, I didn't leave the house for 2 weeks. So today, I picked out a tie, I put everything together. I couldn't wait to get here and tell you that winter is over for Vancouver. Then I saw the 14-day charts, and it's really looking cold in early March. So we'll see what becomes of that, all right? And in the short term, certainly moderating towards more seasonal temperatures. Now it's quite mild today. We got up to about 7 or 8 degrees, I believe. And we have a little more wetter weather on the way as well. Our maximums for today, province-wide, okay, quite chilly in the northeast corner of the province. But again, that's not bitter cold. The Arctic, the extreme cold warnings have ended for the northeast part of the province. Coastal areas all right back up to normal at around about 8 degrees. And as far as weather warnings province-wide, there's not a single one left. There's no snowfall warnings, no strong wind or rain events, at least not yet. The extreme cold going on still in Alberta and in parts of Saskatchewan. Wind chills to about 40 below for tonight and tomorrow morning. Your province-wide BC forecast, quite pleasant over the northern part of the province. Now, it's still chilly, but it's not extreme cold. Your high in Fort St. John, 22 below zero with some sun tomorrow. To the northwest, a little bit milder than it has been, -8 in Dease Lake, and actually climbing onto the high side of zero for the north coast. Coastal sections and inland, a little bit of an inflow happening with that offshore weather system. That's bringing the clouds, the light precipitation to the coastline as well. That Whistler icon looks a little overplayed. It may be some drizzle with a few snow grains mixed in, that sort of thing. Your Metro Vancouver long-range forecast, a cloudy day tomorrow, only a couple of sprinkles. Wednesday's all wet, Thursday's not. That's some heavy rain coming Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Look at those temperatures, double digits for a few in a row. Dan?
No kidding. Russ Lacate, thanks so much.
You bet.
And thank you for being with us on CBC Vancouver News. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and, of course, our website, cbc.ca/BC. Good night.